Marx is always talking about contradictions in the law of value. But these aren't logical contradictions like round square or military intelligence. They are contradictions inscribed into the very heart of the social relations of a capitalist society. Some prefer to use the word antagonisms. We are all painfully aware that modern society is full of social antagonisms. There's poverty amidst great wealth, overwork alongside massive unemployment, banks taking away homes, gentrification, racial tensions, violence against women, labor struggles, environmental apartheid, police brutality, gang violence, hate groups, massive dislocations of populations, and lots of war. Marx was interested in explaining all of these antagonisms, but he doesn't start his analysis with any of them. Instead, he begins with what at first seems a rather innocuous thing, the commodity. Why? Because the commodity is the most elemental piece of the social relations of capitalism.
Let's take a closer look at that pan. The iron ore for that pan came from the Mesabi Range. Nature put the iron ore there, but it wasn't worth anything until men came along. Men with tools.
The productive relations between people take the form of commodity exchanges. The commodity is the basic organizer of social relations. So, if we want to understand how all of these different social antagonisms relate to one another, we need to start with the commodity. As we've already seen, the commodity contains a contradiction. It has a use value and an exchange value. At first glance, this does not seem all that antagonistic. Yet, as we start to look closer, we see more significant antagonisms emerge. Why is it that people must sell their labor in the market for exchange value, for money? Because they can't produce their own means of subsistence for themselves. This is a distinct aspect of capitalism. In previously existing modes of production, the majority of people had use of some sort of means of production for themselves, which they used to make most of the things they needed. People sometimes bartered for or sold things, but they did so by selling part of the surplus they had created for themselves. Selling off your surplus product is very different than producing exclusively for exchange. Over the course of a very long, violent historical process called primitive accumulation, these means of production were privatized and became the possession of a group of people called capitalists. Whereas before people labored directly for their own use, now they have to enter the market in order to attain their subsistence. So already the fact that we produce for exchange and not directly for use expresses a social antagonism between the propertied and the propertyless. There is an underlying coercion already at work in the free market, and this coercion requires some threat of violence to enforce it, whether it be a state, private military, or hired thugs. Violence was necessary to privatize the means of production, and it remains necessary to enforce all of the legal aspects of property. In order for people to buy their subsistence in the market, they have to sell something else. Since the means of production are privately owned, the only thing they have to sell is their labor. But of course, their labor can't really be sold. Instead, we sell our ability to labor, our labor power. We sell a definite amount of working time, whether it is measured in hours, weeks, or years. And this is why value is an expression of labor time. Our own creative working ability, the very thing that makes us human and links us to society, becomes a commodity that we sell to someone else, a commodity called labor power. Labor power, like any other commodity, has a use value and an exchange value, and, you guessed it, there is a contradiction between them. The exchange value is the money paid for our working time, the wage. Wages are set by the cost of our subsistence. They depend on the cost of food, housing, clothes, and transportation. But the use value of our labor power is that it can produce value. These are the two opposing sides of labor power. On one hand, it costs a wage. On the other hand, it produces value. This makes it possible to produce more value than we are paid for. You could be paid $5 an hour, yet produce $20 worth of commodity value an hour. If this happened, you would be exploited. In fact, your rate of exploitation would be 300%. Exploitation is made possible by the contradiction between the use value and exchange value of labor power. Exploitation explains a puzzle about capitalism, the existence of profit. Capitalists start off the day with a sum of money which they invest in production. At the end of the day, they have a quantity of commodities which they sell for more money than their initial investment. It would seem that they have made a profit just by buying and selling things. Yet, profit can't be made through mere buying and selling. This is because buying and selling is a zero-sum game. When we exchange commodities, we are just moving commodities from one place to another. This process does nothing to change the total amount of value in society. Sure, it might be possible to rip someone off, to overcharge someone, to charge a monopoly price. But a win for one person in the market is a loss for another. There could be no aggregate profit just by moving commodities around. Yet profit is something that does exist in the aggregate. The total amount of value in society grows each year through this expansion of value called profit. So we seem to have a puzzle or a contradiction on our hands. On one hand, the market is a realm of equality and symmetry. Market exchange conserves the value of commodities, losses balancing out wins, to create an inherent symmetry. Yet profit is a phenomena where value expands. Profit is asymmetrical. More comes from less. How is this possible? To solve this puzzle, Marx tells us we must look beyond the market into the mysterious realm of production. It is in production where value is expanded through the exploitation of labor. Exploitation does not break any of the rules of market exchange because it doesn't happen in exchange. Labor power is bought at its value. The products of that labor are sold at their value. No profit has been made through these exchanges. The profit is not from the market at all, but from the labor process. It is the amount of labor performed over and above the value of the wages that determines the amount of profit. While the market remains a realm of equality and symmetry, production is a realm of asymmetry and exploitation. Thus, there is a contradiction between production and exchange. And this contradiction is made possible by the contradiction between the use value and exchange value of labor power.